what would I do? What would I have done? I would have nobody to go to. And in that case, if my informal network is broken down and I don't have access to the formal sector, especially in the era before you have mobile money transfers, I'm kind of stuck. And in that case, my consumption is probably going to very closely track my income. And that's a bad thing if it's a drought year, because your income is going to fall a lot in an agrarian society in a bad rainfall year or in a drought year. So now, all of a sudden, without access to credit, I'm not able to decouple income and consumption anymore. And that's actually what you find in a lot of data and settings where there isn't very good credit market access. So let's go to our clicker question. I've just been talking about precipitation and drought and all these sorts of things. Just kind of thinking for a second, the models that are out there, the sort of climate science models that are out there that talk about what the world is going to look like, say, in 2050 or 2060, basically claim, the world is going to get hotter by a couple degrees Celsius, and the variability in precipitation, not in all the models, but in at least some of the models, variability in precipitation will increase. Is that going to make informal insurance more or less productive or useful? Or is it kind of ambiguous? Could there be a reason why it could be more useful and a reason why it could be less useful? Okay, so most people said less useful, but a bunch of people said it could go either way or it could become more useful. So let me just hear first from someone just making the argument for why informal lending will become less useful. That's right. So if we just have lots of these sort of community-wide or region-wide shocks, covariate shocks, meaning correlated among neighboring households, that's the sort of situation I've been pointing to for where informal lending will be less useful. What would be the story under which, in this situation of more variability, informal lending could actually be more useful? Yeah. That's right. So the reason why this might be ambiguous is if I'm still too poor to access formal lending, and we're in a world where now I can borrow with people in the capital because of mobile money, which just reduces transactions costs, maybe it's still going to be pretty useful for me, informal lending, even more useful because I'm going to be hit by more of these shocks out in my village, which aren't going to affect my relatives or neighbors on the other side of the country. So you can argue this either way, and I think the kind of obvious leading explanation is the covariate shock argument, and most of you put that out there, but there is this story under which informal lending can become still very important, or even more important going forward. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, and maybe something that's hard to know at this point. Any other arguments for ambiguity or for positive or negative effects? Those are pretty much the two I was fishing for. Can you think of any others? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. So that's interesting. So you're saying if climate change causes a lot of residential or economic sectoral dislocation, it's going to kind of maybe weaken the ties that make informal lending possible to begin with. So maybe it's just not going to be as much of a possibility or a likelihood. That's interesting. Yeah. Even if there is this mobility and dislocation. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think we got two kind of counter arguments on each side, and so it seems pretty much like an open question what's going to happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. If it just increases volatility overall, that volatility would be bad for the financial sector for the most part, unless you can take advantage of it, unless you can kind of gamble on it and make money off of it, but that doesn't always work out well. Okay. So let's consider another setting. This is going to be the less rosy side of things. This is going to be the Meatu, Tanzania setting that I work in, and this is the sort of witch-killing area. So this part of Tanzania is poorer than the part of Nigeria that usually works in. It's actually one of the poorest districts in all of Tanzania, which is quite a poor country overall. It's a semi-arid district, so average rainfall is less than half on average in Meatu than what it was in Kaduna. It's much drier. Low per capita incomes, and very frequent droughts in this area. So frequent covariate shocks, and not as much income to go around. This is a picture before the rains, obviously, because the place will get quite green after the rains. But this is a village center, like 2 months before the rains, or a month and a half before the rains. Looks pretty desolate and dry, that's why I put it there. The main crops grown tend to be crops that are quite good in drier settings. So sorghum and millet tend to be more drought resistant than maize, although there's different varieties of maize. And there's also the main local cash crop is cotton. So something like 60% of households in this area grow cotton, which again is grown typically in semi-arid areas. And the setting here, this is a region that I worked in for a different reason, not to study these kinds of shocks or witch killing, but I went there to study local public goods provision. So local funding for schools and health and water, which is something I'd also been working on in Kenya for my dissertation. And I started working in this area because it was sort of on the other side of Lake Victoria, but on the Tanzania side. And the NGO I was working with in Kenya was also working as part of Tanzania, so the logistics was easier for me to work there. And we started collecting surveys on local funding for schools and these other things. But as I started reading more in this area and working there, I found out that there was this epidemic of witch killing in this whole region of Western Tanzania. And the question was why? What's going on? Is there something that can help us understand the causes of this witch killing? And I'll tell you more about what the witches are. But the idea in this setting, in Meatu and other parts of Western Tanzania, is people often blame witches for their misfortunes. That's the kind of main logic. Witches are people who are meant to have these sort of magical or occult powers. They can, control other people's fate or have some influence over the weather and whatnot. They're widely believed to have those kinds of powers. And if something bad happens to me, and that could be, a health problem, that could be I failed a test, that could be a bunch of different things. Many people in this part of Tanzania will sort of point the finger at a witch or think that witchcraft was behind their misfortune. And then what they would do to try to deal with that misfortune is go to a traditional healer to help them, pay the traditional healer to use magic to fight against the witchcraft. So you can use these kinds of supernatural powers for good or for evil. And the witches are people that use it in a malicious way, whereas the traditional healers are people that are supposed to use it in a positive way. So very often a health problem is part of it, but it need not only be restricted to health problems. It could be a broader sort of misfortune. The identity of the witches and the traditional healers is very strongly gendered. Almost all the people accused of being witches in this part of Tanzania are women, and almost all the traditional healers, although not all, but most of them are men. So there are female traditional healers too. But there's one or two males sort of in the data that were killed as witches. But it's sort of 90% women who are witches and 90% men who are traditional healers. So accusation of witchcraft against women, it tends to be older women, is just a very systematic form of violence against women in this region. Okay, so what does this have to do with, with economics? Again, people link witchcraft to these important economic outcomes, like rainfall and crop yields and other things. The strength of witchcraft beliefs is particularly high in this part of Tanzania. The anthropologists who study this issue in other parts of Tanzania claim that in the ethnically Sukuma region, which is a very large ethnic group in Tanzania, witchcraft beliefs are particularly strong. This is also a region, is a kind of poor, relatively isolated region of Tanzania. It's a region where 2/3 of the population claim to follow traditional religion, so they're neither Christian nor Muslim. They, when asked, say, no, I'm not Christian, I'm not Muslim, I follow our religion, or they say they use the term for no religion, basically. I have no religion. And we actually find in the data that the witch-killing outbreak is even more concentrated in areas where there's higher proportions of people who follow traditional religion. So there is a cultural element to this, but we'll also discuss the economic logic or the economic explanation for what's going on. So this is kind of a shocking thing to see and be part of. There are lots of witch killing. So the government figures, the official figures, which almost certainly miss a lot of killing in the 70s and 80s, claim that in this region there were 3,000 witch murders. I collected data in 67 villages over 11 years, and the 11 years included recall data. So we basically said, okay, over the last decade, tell me how many witches were killed in this village. We also got data on which years were drought years or flood years to try to get a sense of the economic conditions, whether there had been disease outbreaks, other things. During that period, there was an average of about 1 witch murder per village and about 1 witch attack per village. So that's 65 to 73. So over the course of this decade, these are villages with only a couple hundred households, a few hundred households. Over this decade, each village had on average a witch attack and a witch murder, which are separate. A witch attack is a non-fatal attack. The annual risk of being murdered, if you're an old woman in this area, is 1 in 500. That's very high in terms of a murder rate for any demographic group. So this is a very high murder rate. So this is a real issue. It's a major public policy issue in this part of Tanzania. It's been discussed a lot. It's been discussed for decades. There have been several attempts by the central government to crack down on witch killing and try to punish those who are killing witches that are very strongly resisted by the local population. Because the feeling is the witches are doing harm to us. Why is the government coming in and trying to help the witches? The witches are the bad guys. We're the good guys. We're trying to get rid of these criminals. People see witches as criminals. That's the way to see it. And in fact, there are local committees, there are village committees in all Tanzanian villages. And there's a subgroup of the village committee that's responsible for law and order. And that subgroup are the people who very often hear complaints about witchcraft. The subgroup is called the Sungu Sungu in this part of Tanzania. And it's comprised basically of male elders who are responsible for security. It's sort of an elders' council. So after independence in Tanzania in the 1960s, the traditional elders' councils and chiefs were abolished in Tanzania. But the Sungu Sungu is sort of the remnant of those traditional institutions. That's one way to think about them. And as part of this traditional role, they're supposed to protect the village from witchcraft. Okay, so this is some data. I'm not sure if you guys can even see it, but I put arrows at a couple of things here. So the point, you see witch murders there, this is per village year. The 0.09 means roughly once every 10 or 11 years in a village there's a witch killing. And witch murders per 1,000 households is about 0.23. So that's a pretty high rate. The total murder rate is 0.2. So witch murders are half of all murders in this district of Tanzania. So again, it's a very large share of violent crime are these attacks against women accused of being witches. The other red arrow there goes by extreme rainfall, drought or flood. So again, we took a history of the years when there were major economic problems in these villages. These are overwhelmingly agricultural villages. In 18% of village years, there's a drought or flood. So roughly 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 years, they experience what they call an extreme drought or flood. We try to be clear, this is like a big deal, not like a little bit of drought, like a big drought. So again, we discussed Bloom and Sachs, we talked about semi-arid parts of sub-Saharan Africa are really subject to lots of drought. That's basically the issue. The issue here, you can see about 13% of those cases were droughts and 6% were floods. If you go down the slide a little bit there, per capita income in this region, when I collected the data about a decade ago, was only about $200 per person per year. So it's very low. And this is a poor area. Average years of schooling is only 4. It's dominated by the Sukuma ethnic group that I mentioned before. And most households are growing cotton as well. Let's stare at this. Does anybody see any other patterns on this slide or any other things that jump out at you? Yeah. Exactly, and we're going to come back to this, and that's an important thing. That's a great point to bring up, which is this proportion is lower than the proportion in, say, the parts of Western Kenya where I work, where there's tons of women's groups. There are not tons of women's groups in this area, and the kind of relative political disempowerment of women is a part of the story, for sure, that we'll come back to. But even the fact that there is this, elders' council, Sungu Sungu, which is all male, is sort of starting to tell you something about the relative political power of men and women. Okay, here's some more. This is the same descriptive statistics, but it's highlighting different things. So we talked about the years of education. Again, there's about 400 households per village. So a medium-sized village. It's not a huge village. If each household has 6 members, it's a couple thousand people in a village. Okay, so who are these witches? I've already mentioned this to some extent. Over 90% are female, and the average age is almost 60. 60 is pretty old in this part of rural Tanzania. So it tends to be older women. And the victims tend to come from poor households. So when we collected information on when the witch killings occurred, we also collected data on who these women were, what kind of households did they come from. They tend to have few assets, little livestock ownership. So we're talking about one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the poorest districts in that country. The villages with lots of adherents of traditional religion, which tend to be more isolated and poor, and the poor households in those villages. These are very poor households by any standard. It's also true that most of the victims are killed during what's called locally the hungry season, the season just before harvest when people are basically running out of food. So a number of these signs point towards economic factors being important. And we'll talk about the kind of stronger evidence in a couple slides. But there's already some hints here that the households that are just desperately poor and really short on food are the ones where women are being killed. So this is some of the data on the characteristics of these women. More than 2/3 were considered below average in terms of asset ownership. More than half were below average in terms of livestock ownership. Okay, so this is really the kicker, and this is where when I started talking to people in these villages and I read the broader anthropological literature, I was thrown for a loop. The anthropological literature and all the anecdotal evidence is very strong on one point, which is these women who are killed as witches are being killed by their own relatives and kin. There isn't a witch hunt where someone else kills them. They're basically being killed by their own relatives. And so there's some very graphic anthropological accounts. So this is an account from the 90s. I ran away from Rusula in Shinyanga district. Shinyanga is right near Meatu. Shinyanga is the region of the province that Meatu is part of. I've been suspected of being a witch. There were many deaths in the family. The rumor began to spread. I was the one who killed them. My own children started to hate me. They started taunting me. I tried to explain, but they wouldn't give me a chance. And of course, if you're accused of being a witch, there's not too much you can do to prove it wrong. You can say, I'm not a witch. But say, oh, you're lying. You're a witch. It's true. I knew what would befall me based on what had happened to others, so they were killed. But one of my grandchildren warned me they were about to kill me, so I ran away. And actually, in Shinyanga town, in the regional capital, there's small communities helped by NGOs of these runaway witches, women who are accused of being witches who have nowhere to go. They fled their homes because of the threat of an attack or they were actually attacked, and there's a few hundred of them living in, basically supported by NGOs. Think of the situation you'd be in if you did nothing and you're accused of being a witch. There's no way to deal with that situation. So just in the last 1 or 2 minutes before we stop, I want to tie this to a broader literature. There's actually a vast anthropological and historical literature on the killing of the elderly, it turns out. And it turns out in societies around the globe, not just in Tanzania, but in societies in North America, in pre-industrial Europe, in East Asia, in Japan, in Australia, etc., there are accounts and traditions of how the elderly are killed in periods of extreme resource shortages. So this is a quote from an Inuit community saying that when resources were meager, the decrepit elderly were abandoned on an ice floe and just left to die. There's a tradition in Japan in years of famine that the elderly would walk up a mountain into the forest to die and not burden the family by eating any more food. There's similar traditions in North America, South America, etc. So this isn't just Tanzania where this occurred, but in very resource poor settings, this kind of phenomenon happens again and again. Yeah. That's something that some of these studies examine, where there are cases where males and females were targeted with this. I think in the Inuit case it was both, for instance. We'll come back in a few slides to why women, because of their relative disempowerment, may be particularly vulnerable in this setting, but it doesn't only have to be women. In some of these settings, it's also males. Tara? That's one of the reasons we'll come back to for this. There's really a bunch of them. One could be political disempowerment, one could be different life expectancy, one could be relative physical strength and ability to maybe fight off attackers. There's a whole bunch that we can come back to. But the gender aspect of it is very extreme. I'm not going to start the model. We will come back to the model after spring break. I'm sorry to end things on such a down note before spring break, but this is a very, very important issue. So have a great spring break. See you in 2 weeks. You'll see Marshall Burke in a week and a half.